Spirit of God in the clear running water, blowing to greatness the trees on the hill. Blow, blow, blow till I be but breath of the Spirit blowing in me.
Hello, welcome to Spirit of Life. My name is Geraldine Lee, your host, and our guest is Dr. Elizabeth Shi. She's a university lecturer at RMIT. Welcome back.
Thank you, Geraldine.
Yeah, so you're a senior lecturer at RMIT. And what project are you on at the moment?
Yeah, our latest research project looks at temporary migrant women and sexual harassment at the workplace. So we've been publishing in law journals and also in wider media on these issues which are faced by temporary migrant women. And they have a lot of vulnerabilities, which makes them more vulnerable to abuse at the workplace because of their insecure work and also of their insecure visa status. Yeah.
And you're passionate about this work, and you're looking to get some support from the community.
Yes, yeah. What a lot of viewers might not realize is that in the university environment and university academics, it's actually quite competitive to apply for and receive grants to fund our research projects. And another thing to realize is also that there's so many other priority kind of areas for the government to fund that it potentially is a very competitive environment. So I would love to speak to anyone who is from the philanthropy sector or perhaps a foundation or a leader of a church if their Christian values align with our research work.
Yeah, so you have strong faith and you're passionate about this.
Yes, absolutely. I believe the Bible teaches us to love one another, and the Bible is clear on that us following example of Jesus as disciples of Jesus. And yeah, temporary migrant workers are such a vulnerable group of workers in Australia that it is God's purpose for me to advocate for them and do research work that provides more evidence to the politicians and to the lawmakers to make some changes and bring more equality to this group of workers.
And one would think that this is a welfare area rather than a business area. Could you explain?
Sure. I work in the Graduate School of Business and Law, and my leadership in my research project is law research and a lot of focus on law changes and law reform. So in terms of our RMIT structure, we also have the Business and Human Rights Research Centre, and that has a lot of researchers as well in that centre that look specifically at human rights issues when it relates to businesses. So when I say law reform, I'm talking about, for example, employment law, discrimination law, migration law. So these legal areas really directly impact on the lived experiences of the temporary migrants.
Yes, and how do those workers get to know about the law? Because they obviously speak a different language. Are there pamphlets out there that explain all this?
Sure, there are quite a few organisations that can help temporary migrants. So, for example, Migrant Worker Centre, they have, as you say, pamphlets and educational resources, and also migrant resource centres. They also help migrants and can connect them as well to other organisations who would help them in their employment law situation. Yeah.
And I suppose some of these workers would be in a lot of stress. They're wanting to get the money for their future studies or get the money for relatives overseas. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of these temporary migrant workers, and especially in our latest project where we look at horticulture industry, so the fruit pickers, for example, from Asian countries or the Pacific Islands, they definitely regularly send money back to their family members, and their family members really rely upon this money that they're sending back. So their visa security or their right to work is very important to them and their families. Yes.
Yes. How do you think that we can overcome that fear because they're not reporting the harassment they go through?
Yes, so I think in terms of as a community, as in a fair society like Australia, I think we need to basically raise public awareness and also realise that this vulnerable group of workers do not have a right to vote. So it's really incumbent upon, say for myself, for academics and for trade unions, for NGOs and also for migrant workers themselves to raise that voice and to raise that public awareness. So if the public is more supportive of these issues, they can then place pressure on their members of parliament and the politicians to do something to make a change and to change the law or change the enforcement of the law, and that would greatly help these temporary migrants.
Yeah, I suppose also it's people can use the law, and it can only help them, but whether or not it helps the whole community is another thing.
Yes, that's why our research is very important, because we provide systemic evidence. So the evidence isn't just about individual cases. We do large-scale surveys. We also do, interviews. We do focus groups. So these type of evidence will reveal a systemic problem, and that would again place political pressure on the politicians to do something about the system. So it isn't, as you say, just up to an individual to go through the very high expense of engaging lawyers, going through courts and waiting for a long time before a court hearing is concluded. So that is way too much burden on the individual complainant. So that's why our research really advocate for more systemic changes.
Yes, because I remember me working as a social worker, sometimes when a patient didn't have enough services, they just give it to him, but not all quadriplegics. It was just they helped him because they were worried about the media holding in on that, on their hospital or service. So I suppose it's great that you're doing it systemically, not only for one person, but for the whole group.
Yes, that's right. That's our aim of our research. Yeah, and another project we are passionate about is possibly making a documentary to, again, raise public awareness and showcase our research, and also having that human face to this particular problem, so the public can view that documentary and be more educated on these issues.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'd like to hear more about it. We're going for a break now. You've been watching Spirit of Life. Stay with us and we'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Spirit of Life. My name is Geraldine Lee, your host, and our guest is Dr Elizabeth Shi, who's a senior lecturer at RMIT. Welcome back.
Thank you.
You have been having a passion to help, the people who are, migrant workers and those who are on temporary visas, who have been exploited by quite a lot of workers. I suppose quite a lot of businesses, hasn't it?
Yes. And our research that we've been conducting reveals these evidence, and a more systemic change is needed. So in terms of law research, we think that, for example, visa insecurity is a big contributor to these vulnerabilities, because when a person is too fearful to complain, they are more likely to put up with very bad treatment by the employer, and there's a big power imbalance between the employer and the employee.
Yes, I know with my sister who's a social worker, she often she says, does she have time to lobby the government? Because what seems to sometimes happen is she's given a ticket, where, when you go to the, transport people, they were going to just help her and say, oh, your workers, I can go on free. But then she thought, I'm going to want to do this systemically for all disabled people. So then she lobbied the government. But that meant more time and more energy, which, but she did freely. And but it's great that you're doing this in a systemic way where you want to make sure that the law, because it's the power of the law, isn't it? When people get scared and they break the law, they will have to do this. Less like, people can't have they have to have disabled toilet seats and, to accommodate them. And until you legislate it, people try and get away with it, don't they?
Yes, absolutely. And the power of the law and the members of parliament who can all vote on laws is very important. And what most people don't understand about the work that academics do is that academics like myself who are leading these research projects face quite a competitive environment in terms of applying for government grants, because there are so many other areas of research. So I would love to chat with any viewers who might be the head of a church or perhaps in a foundation, if their philanthropic donations would align with the priorities in terms of helping temporary migrant workers, that I would love to share my research with them, have a chat with them, and they can contact me by email. My email address is elizabeth.shi@rmit.edu.au.
So they don't actually donate to an organization, they donate to your project, is that what they do?
Yeah, they will donate to my project through RMIT Philanthropic, which is the part of the university that accepts donations. So yes, it will be linked though to my project. Another possibility is to enter a linkage grant application with our research team, and that's another possibility that we can discuss if the viewers are interested. Yeah.
And I could say that Dr. Elizabeth Shi will not be using it to get her next BMW. This is just a joke.
Not,
this is a joke. She drives a very basic car. Yes, so no, that's really good to know, because it's the truth is it's true, the law that brings about big changes.
Yes, absolutely.
I suppose you can feed a person food, but at the end of the day, you want to teach them how to fish. You just don't give them fish without teaching them. It's true education, which is about your documentary. I'm interested to hear about that.
Yes, so we are passionate about the next project, which potentially could be a documentary that we produce. The documentary would again tell the human side of the story of temporary migrants and temporary migrant women especially, and the story that one of the media reports revealed, for example, where a horticultural worker, fruit picker, was asked to work naked during her shift. And God gave her the courage to say no to that, but that's just a really vivid example of the type of mistreatment the temporary migrant workers can face.
Wow, because that's so vulnerable, because they need food, they need help for their families, so they're really put under pressure.
Yes, they're very dependent on their employers, for not only for the job itself, but also to extend their visas, for their visa security. And quite a lot of them are sending money back to their home countries, to their families. So there is a lot of vulnerability and a lot of dependency in that situation.
Yes, yeah. And I think it's also about thinking of justice on a global rather than only local, because you can say, how does it affect me? But what it is about is justice.
Yes, absolutely. And the Bible teaches us that to love one another and to have like a just society. So that's God's vision for us. So I think, God's purpose for me is to do more advocacy and more research in this area. And if God puts on the viewer's heart to support that work, that will be lovely as well. Yeah.
No, that's fantastic, because I know from my own personal experience, I met two students who got abused or exploited, where they came to here, and the whatever agency that brought them here made them go to a hotel where they spent thousands, all their money, like I think 7,000-8,000, and then they were left with nothing and had to work for $4 an hour at some place.
Yeah, stories like that is very common in the temporary migrant visa holders, and a documentary would really highlight these stories and raise public awareness of these really important issues.
So you need actors and people to film and money to pay some of actors, and also to and also for all the research that takes time and energy, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. So yes, we need funding for the documentary itself. We also need funding for more empirical work, which is much needed in this area. For example, the Australian Human Rights Commission have conducted national surveys of the general population on sexual harassment, but there is no specialised research on temporary migrant workers, and it is very likely that the prevalence of sexual harassment in that cohort of workers is much higher than what they found in their evidence for the general population.
Yeah. That's really interesting. We'll go for a break now. You've been watching Spirit of Life. Stay with us and we'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Spirit of Life. My name is Geraldine Lee, your host, and our guest is Dr Elizabeth Shi. She's a senior lecturer at RMIT. Welcome back.
Thank you, Geraldine.
I'll call you Elizabeth. Do you know any other organizations that do help these migrant workers and temporary visa holders? What sort of organizations help them, because they get very often exploited, don't they?
Yes, definitely. So I mentioned before the Migrant Worker Centre and also Migrant Resource Centres, but also churches do help a lot as well in this space. So for example, I know that the Planet Shakers Church run an Empower Food Centre, and especially during the lockdowns, especially during the lengthy lockdowns that we had in Melbourne, where international students, for example, were left without any welfare or any Centrelink payments. They were really in desperate circumstances, and they had Planet Shakers helping them with basic needs like food. So Empower Food Centre distributed grocery items like milk and bread to those the most vulnerable temporary migrants.
Yes, and I know of some students or people from overseas who come, where their whole village gives them money for their airfare here, and they have totally no money when they come, and can end up on the streets, and this is a global problem. And as Christians, you were saying that we all should help.
Yes, absolutely. The Bible teaches us to love one another, and I believe it's God's purpose for me to do research and advocacy in this area and help temporary migrants. And certainly the community can help as well. They can help by raising awareness, and also can help by writing to their members of parliament, and to put political pressure on the politicians to do something to help these vulnerable workers.
I suppose unless there's a law for people who actually employ these people to protect these workers, things won't change, And you were telling me about something about the 88 days visa.
Yes, that's right. So one of the interviewees in our empirical data research told us that when she was working on a farm, she was told by her employer, her boss, that only if she had sex with him, that would he sign off on the 88-day extension. So her 88-day visa would expire, and she had to get a signature from an employer to extend her visa to the next 88 days. So she was really in that very tough spot of place a lot of pressure, because he said, I would only sign this paperwork for you if you have sex with me. So that kind of exploitation, that kind of power imbalance is something that politicians and lawmakers need to be aware of, and also to make some systemic changes to address these issues.
Yeah, so it's not only they have this fear that if they report, they will be sent home straight away, or not be able to support their family or get the education they would like in Australia.
Yes, that's right.
So they need, in a sense, protection, that, as someone who reveals this or becomes a whistleblower, that they will be protected and not to fear.
That's right. Yes. So a lot of the trade unions have been advocating, and also support their advocacy for what's called an employment justice visa. So that is a visa extension whilst a legal complaint is on foot. So, for example, if a temporary migrant woman experiences what I just described to you, like very blatant sexual harassment or sexual assault at the workplace, they can go to the authorities and report that and make a complaint, and potentially wait for a legal process to conclude. So that potentially could take months and sometimes years. So if that's something that the migration visa system can cater for, then there is more likelihood of a complainant coming forward.
Yes, and I suppose lawmakers tend to be, a lot of them are lawyers and doctors, and they want to see evidence, and I suppose that's your job, like to do research and bring evidence so that they will be aware and want to change laws to protect these migrant workers and these temporary visa.
Yes, and I believe it's God's purpose for me to do this empirical work and to provide the evidence, because the evidence is very powerful in policy changes, in law reform changes. So all of those things need to be evidence-based, and academics are in a great position to do that, because we are independent. We're not paid by like an industry, or we're not paid by an industry employer. We are not biased, so we are independent from different interest groups. So we can report the truth. Basically, we can find the truth, and we can empirically find the evidence.
That's a fantastic thing that you're doing for the community. And how more can people help?
Yes, certainly. So what viewers might not realize is that university academics have obviously teaching and learning teaching responsibilities. They also have research responsibilities. And for a large-scale research project, we actually need a lot of funding. So we need to pay research assistants, we need to organize interviews or organize surveys, and all of these require resources. So it's quite a competitive environment where different teams of academics apply for funding from the government. So one way that viewers can help is make donations. So if I would love to chat to maybe leaders of churches or leaders of foundations or philanthropic organizations, if their Christian values aligns, if God puts on their heart that their Christian values do align with this kind of research for vulnerable workers.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, at the end of the day, all these people are our brothers and sisters.
Yes, brothers and sisters in Christ. Yes, and we need to follow the example of Jesus, where he healed people and he saw injustices, and then he did something to help those vulnerable people.
Yes, and what do you think that people can do? Prayer, is that also something they can help those people who don't have maybe too much money?
Yes, certainly. Prayer is very powerful. So to pray for our leaders and our lawmakers to be more aware of these issues. Also pray for our work as academics, for our academic work. And pray for all of these organizations also helping, like, for example, the Migrant Workers Centre and churches helping these workers.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I suppose it's tax deductible?
Yes, it is tax deductible.
Thank you so much. I wish you all the best for your project, and you'll be in my prayers. Goodbye, and God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you, Geraldine.
You've been watching Spirit of Life. Join us again next week. Goodbye, and God bless you.